When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but I was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset. But when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open and said, "See? There's nothing that..." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police. Well, he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cranked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming and she freaked out, grabbed the knife and walked away. Then police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. So this story happened about a year ago when I was in college. It was the night before Halloween and the story goes into Halloween Day. Since it's now spooky season, I decided to share it with everyone. The night before Halloween, my roommates and I were in bed and everyone was asleep except for me because I had been sick and my sleep schedule was all jacked up. I had finally fell asleep for about 2 hours-ish and then woke up at around 2 a.m, which would make it Halloween Day, feeling uneasy and a little creeped out. I kept telling myself to shut up and I'm freaking myself out until the doorknob started shaking like someone was trying to desperately get in. The way our room was laid out was that it was split into a front room and a back room. I lived in the front room and my bed faced the hallway window and the door was just off to the left of the window. So I know no one was standing at the door because I could see their shadow casted on the window. Also, my bed laid horizontally against the wall and was right at the corner to the hallway. Had to zigzag through our room to get to the back. All I could do was lay and stare at the door while this was happening for a solid 2 to 3 minutes. After it stopped, I just lied there, awake, and it started again. I tried to listen for voices and stare intensely at the window trying to see if I can catch someone's movement to see if someone was out the window. I was too scared to actually get up and peek through the blinds. After it stopped for the second time, I said out loud, "F this, I'm done with this shit. Good night." And after I closed my eyes to go to sleep, I heard a voice in my ear say, "Night." I immediately opened my eyes and laid frozen for a hot minute and then proceeded to get on YouTube to watch happy videos while listening to our desk chairs creak as if someone was leaning back in them. This little bit doesn't continue with the story necessarily, but did happen the next day and was creepy. Fast forward to the next day, I got on my phone and had the app BitLife downloaded. I had 666 notifications on it. I thought maybe it was a Halloween thing, but when I asked my friends they told me they never had that many notifications with the number 666. When I was old enough to be home alone but still at that young age, I lived in a court in a lower and middle class neighborhood at the time. It was a small developing town right before the boom of city growth. a place with one grocery store in the middle of town. So pretty quiet place where kids would play from sunrise to late in the dark of night with no real worries. To explain better, my court was a U shape with like 8 houses in it. Really one way in and out. Me and my friends lived across the street from each other, right before the curve rounding of the U court. We were both 3 houses away from the exit of it. It was not a crazy busy street by exit/entrance of our court. We could play in the main street for hours and only run into the people who lived in our court driving in. That's how dead the area around our court was to the public. No one came around unless to visit our court. No one really had reason to be driving or walking by our court because there were better ways to the other homes around us off the main busy roads. Going past our court is going out of your way to do so. I should also add my friends' parents were not friendly and hated people coming to their house, so we only ever went over to my house or played in our court, which is important later. It was Halloween, and I had decided to stay home and trick or treat my neighborhood with my friend. We will call her Ashley, who lived across the street. It was late Halloween. The kids had gone home hours ago. The streets were dead silent, except for us. My family had left earlier to one of the rich neighborhoods to get the awesome chocolate bars with large king-size bars. After they were going to hang out at a friend's house afterward, then be home late or spend the night wherever the night would take them. I didn't want to hang out with my younger siblings and their younger friends. I wanted to hang out with Ashley, so I asked to stay home alone. My mom agreed with the promise I would go in and lock the house up as soon as she went in. I agreed. It was close to 10 or 11 at night, so our night went great and it was dying down with her waiting for her parents to eventually call her in for bed. Ashley was chilling with me as we sat on the curb in front of my house talking, which being in that preteen stage was a common occurrence, when we noticed this middle-aged man walk past the end of our court. Looking around as he passed, he paused, noticing us. The man slowed down, stared at us for a bit as he walked. No big deal, but something was off. I can still remember what he looked like because I remember how odd seeing him was. Because we grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and I did not recognize this man. He was a white, average man with a beer belly. It was dark, but I could make him out under the streetlights as he casually passed our court. He wasn't a local. Ashley asked if I knew him, as I shook my head no, before we obviously went back to talking. Something about him made her start to keep an eye on the court entrance. He's walking by again. Ashley would repeat when she noticed him walk by again and again and again. That guy wasn't dressed for a long walk or a jog, wearing a tan jacket, dark blue jeans and what looked like heavy work boots. I don't imagine going on a planned long walk with those. But we dumb kids ignored these red flags until the 5th time. Then we got a little freaked out. "Hey, that guy passed again." Ashley frowned as I turned my back to the entrance of the court as I was talking to her. He wasn't walking anymore, casually standing under the streetlight at the entrance of our court on the same side we were, staring. I remember how awkward he seemed, shoving his hands into his pocket trying to act casual. Except for the fact he just kept staring at me. We got creeped out as he kept looking around at the empty street quickly, then back at me, before he went back to walking past our court. Something inside me told me to leave. Again, he didn't look creepy. He looked like a typical white suburban dad. It was his eyes. He was just staring at me. I'm creeped out. Let's go inside before he comes back. I remember Ashley breathing before we got up. We tried our best to ignore our fear since he was gone again. I walked her across the street to her home. To add, I was the friend that was like the mom. I always made sure they got home okay before myself. Yes, you most likely see where this is going. I walked her to her house across the street before I headed home myself. Everything was fine. I quickly ran across the street to my house, happy to get to freedom. I turned the knob of my front door, quickly trying to get into the safety of my home. When I felt the knob refused to turn, I remember holding my breath as I struggled to get the door to open. That's when it dawned on me. I didn't have house key. The door was never locked unless we were inside sleeping. This was before cell phones. My family had accidentally locked me out with no way to get a hold of them. I panicked. I was locked outside with the creepy man walking around. I was scared. I moved away from my front door. I remember trying to calm myself as I decided to go through the backyard and try our sliding glass doors, which, again, shouldn't be locked. I walked down the path of my front door to walk around the front of my house to the side gate. That was my plan. I remember stopping with fear. I remember my air being knocked out of me when I noticed the man was stopped in front of the end of our street once again. There was no way he did a full lap around our court to end up back there. He must have just pretended to keep walking. His eyes lit up as he smiled at me when he noticed I was still out, raising his hand up in a casual hi before he started to walk towards me. His steps towards me were casual steps, like he was just taking a walk, but he was staring at me. I panicked at his movements towards me and bolted across the street to Ashley's house, abandoning all attempts to break into my house. I remember thinking that Ashley's house is the only one with signs of life, and I needed an adult right then. I remember running as fast as I could, getting up the stone step walkway to the door. I pounded in panic, pushing the doorbell repeatedly. Ashley opened the door, confused by the panicked look on my face. I'm locked out, and Ashley, he's coming. I remember screaming, trying to push my way towards her, scared, shitless. I have to ask my mom. Those words broke me as she quickly closed the door, most likely not realizing the fate she was leaving me to. I remembered crying as the door slammed in my face. In a panic, I turned around trying to see where the man was, how close he had gotten with my back turned. He had resumed walking the court when I assured the door was open, now only a house and a half length away from me. The second I looked at him, with the door closed, he stopped his casual walking in the sidewalk. He instantly started to run towards me, a diagonal through the street, beeline towards me quickly. I remembered half turning to push the doorbell repeatedly in what felt like a decade of fear, until Ashley's door opened, her hand grabbing my arm and yanking me inside the door, slamming the door quickly with a quick flick of her wrist, locking the door. I was in tears as she gripped my arm. I remember how desperately we moved to the side windows quickly to see him. I remember how mad he looked at me as he stood inches from where I once was. He gave me a dirty look, his chest heaving as slowly backstepped of my friend's porch down the hallway. He shoved his hand into his pockets as he turned to face away from us and continued walking out of our court. I don't remember much after that. I remember breaking down crying as Ashley's mom came to my aid, realizing this was serious. I remember the cops being called and having my statement given. I also remember I stayed with Ashley until my parents got home shortly after the cops left. Ashley's dad walked me home and explained everything. I remembered my mom hugging me in panic, kissing me, and apologizing that my younger 8-year-old brother must have locked the door when they left because he was paranoid of bad guys. I don't remember being home alone after that until we moved years later into a new town. I can still remember this day clearly. I still to this day can't figure out his intentions. Kidnapping? Worse? To this day, I still can't find a reason that sits well with me. I still to this day get paranoid at night, especially of smiling strangers.